Self-Aware and Prepared by Tara Narowski, performed by Dr. Franz Granier. The diver was a 45-year-old male instructor with approximately 300 lifetime dives. He denied taking any medication and reported no history of medical conditions. The dives. The diver was teaching an advanced open water course at a local lake popular with divers. The water temperature ranged from 26 to 33 degrees centigrade. He was accompanied by his wife, who was assisting the class as a dive master, and they performed a series of 5 dives over the weekend. They completed 3 dives on Saturday with extended surface intervals between the dives, followed by a 16.5-hour surface interval before the first dive on Sunday. The first Sunday dive was 34 minutes long at an average of 16 meters, and, to meet the depth requirements for the course, a maximum depth of 30 meters. After a 90-minute surface interval, the divers began their second dive of the day, and this focused on search and recovery skills. It was a 48-minute dive with an average depth of 16 meters and a maximum of 19. The diver reported non-stressful dives with minimal exertion, besides following and monitoring his students. The dives were within recreational dive limits, and his computer was in the conservative setting. The fastest ascent of the weekend was at a rate of 2.5 meters per minute. Complications. As everyone was packing up after the 5th and final dive of the weekend, the diver began to experience a dull ache in his right shoulder and numbness in his right leg. When he began to have difficulty walking, he asked his wife to make the drive back to the scuba shop. After a few minutes in the car, the diver's right arm started feeling cold. He checked to make sure that the cold sensation was not because of the damp, long-sleeved rash guard that he was wearing and the cold air blowing from the air conditioner. He noticed that the cold sensation had turned to numbness and slight tingling that progressed down his right arm and leg. They pulled over the vehicle and set up their DAN oxygen unit, and the diver began breathing from the demand valve. They also set up a non-rebreather mask in case the diver lost consciousness. Once the diver was breathing 100% oxygen, his wife called DAN. The DAN medic assessed the situation and directed them to the nearest emergency room. Fortunately, the diver's symptoms subsided after about 45 minutes of breathing oxygen. When he reached the hospital, there was no more numbness or tingling in the arm, and he could walk normally. Although his symptoms were gone, he was admitted to the emergency room for further analysis. When the diver arrived, he was put on a non-rebreather mask with a flow rate of 15 liters per minute. The emergency room doctor was in contact with DAN medics, who provided contact information for multiple hyperbaric medical specialists in the area for further consultation. The diver continued to breathe pure oxygen for 2 hours, and his symptoms never returned. He underwent multiple tests, including an electrocardiogram, magnetic resonance imaging, CT scan, and chest X-ray, all of which were unremarkable. The doctor monitored the diver for 3.5 hours before releasing him. So in total, the diver had been breathing 100% oxygen for approximately 5 hours, except during the tests and necessary breaks. The conclusion of the doctors ultimately was that it seemed to be a case of decompression sickness, or DCS, which resolved before the diver was admitted to hospital. The diver's report of mild unilateral up and lower extremity paresthesia that were resolved by surface-supplied oxygen does suggest central nervous system decompression sickness. The general recommendation in such cases is to treat with hyperbaric oxygen, regardless of the symptoms resolving. In this case, though, after extensive testing and prolonged monitoring, the physician was confident that hyperbaric oxygen was not necessary. Discussion. This incident is a good example of how being a prepared diver and having an emergency action plan can improve the chances of recovery. The diver ensured he was properly hydrated, well fed, and sufficiently rested throughout the weekend of diving. Although the reported dive profiles were within the diver's computer limits, with slow ascents, and adequate surface interval times between dives, he still acknowledged and recognized the signs and symptoms of neurological decompression sickness. If the diver had ignored the symptoms or waited longer to seek professional medical attention, his eventual recovery might not have been so swift nor so complete. In many cases, divers choose to neglect decompression sickness symptoms or attribute them to separate causes, such as lifting heavy objects, tight wetsuits, or overexertion. The diver contemplated the numbness and tingling sensation in the extremities astutely and recognized that these symptoms required immediate action. He acknowledged that there were risks associated with scuba diving and was adequately prepared with emergency oxygen, with various types of breathing apparatus. Both the diver and his buddy were trained on how to use the emergency oxygen and how to determine when medical intervention was necessary. The diver's doctor advised him to discontinue repetitive deep dives, to consult a neurologist for a possible explanation other than diving, and to get screened for a patent foramen ovale, plus to wait 30 days before returning to diving. The diver has returned to diving since the incident and has not experienced any further problems. This incident can serve to remind all divers of the importance of self-awareness and having an emergency action plan. It is crucial to be mindful when considering symptoms, to have an immediate oxygen supply available, and to seek professional medical attention promptly when it is necessary.